feasibility assessment on this existing building. And so what that means is that we essentially look at the building for all the different needs, including the basic building assessment, things such as lack of outlets, like Dale and I will talk about in the gym, and also program issues. Do you have all the spaces? Well, one thing in particular, you can point to portables and say, well, those are temporary buildings, therefore there is a space need issue in this building. So how I came about to determine these things is I've got a long experience in educational design. I've been working in architecture, starting out on schools back in 1987. So I've worked on dozens and dozens of schools, and so I have some experience with that. But most of what I rely on is hard data that comes from the State Department of Education. They produce a set of rules and guidelines to tell us how big to make certain spaces. And there's also national standards that come from places such as the School Facilities Assessment Database. So I take all these different points and bring them together into a data-driven report that will tell us in mathematical terms what is good and bad about the building, and it drives some conclusions as to what we need to do. So anyways, we visited the site back in December and did a preliminary presentation in January, February, and to show you sort of the thought process that I go through, that data that I get from the state and national standards, I put into worksheets and start to crunch numbers, looking at everything from the enrollments to the space needs, but I also study each grouping of students that goes through the system, so that way I know and understand, what the real needs are, because students don't come in neat little packages of 25. So you can't just add by 25 to the school building. You really have to look at, all right, if I've got one grade that's, say, 54 students, I can't split that into 25 very easily. On the other hand, if I've got a classroom that's 48, it fits a little bit nicer, but there's always a little extra space. And so there's two sort of systems that we look at, and that is the actual educational capacity of the building, how many students are going to be taught, but then also the core capacity. What the sort of bell that comes through. If you've got one grade that's much larger than the rest, they utilize spaces such as the gym, caf, and library more intensely than the grades that have smaller students in. So I really spend a lot of time drilling down to think about the students, how they use the building, where they go, where they're going to be, and what those needs are, room by room, space by space. And so that's what all these worksheets are. And when you see the full report, there's, I believe, from table A through table G. So once that is accomplished, what it results in is a table up here that's this one up the end, and basically it's a space needs worksheet, which tells us how many classrooms and how big they are. What size the gym, what size the caf, what size the library needs to be. And then I compare that new versus existing to try to come up with what our space needs are. Another thing that I do is study the building. So I know what the program is now. I know how many spaces we need and what the size are. Now I start to fit that into the existing building. Are the current spaces meeting those needs? And I don't just study the building, we're also studying what's happening in the site. So starting with the site plan, what we can see going on is that there's a few things that don't quite work when it comes to the Department of Education rules. There's not a significant turnaround for parent drop-off versus the bus drop-off. So right now, the way I understand it, parents mostly park into the street when they're lining up to pick up the children. That creates sort of a dangerous situation where you've got students being picked up and dropped off on the street, not on the lot itself. I know that the site itself is roughly about 5 acres. It might be a little bit more than that. But the problem is that there's some other natural features that get in our way. Essentially, when you look at the site, we've got the building in the middle, the gray box, We've got the portable classrooms on the end. Oops, I didn't. Here, and we've got a small drop-off in this area, and we've got a small driveway that comes in the back around from here, but all this up in this area is higher in elevation. And so if you were to try to make that a parking lot, you'd have to move a significant amount of earth in order to flatten that out enough to put parking on. And so having a driveway or something else up in there, it just becomes really cost prohibitive. So the site is somewhat limited in what we can do because, you know, we're kind of bordered by this, and we're bordered on the other side by the street. And so all we've got to work with is the side there, and it's really, really tight. Moving on to the building itself, there's a few similar challenges that are going on. First things first is your main entrance is here at the administration area. And that is actually very remote from the rest of the building. In this day and age where we're facing a school shooting in this country every few weeks, we only hear about the big ones on the news, but if you go online and research how many school shootings there's been, there's something like 20 or 30 a year in this country. So this is a really significant problem. Ever since Columbine, we've been designing schools differently to make them safe. One of the key parts to that is putting the administration in a key zone where they can monitor the entire school. In this location here, it's way at the end of the wing of the building, way at the end of the building. It's not a key location. It's not the optimal spot for putting the main entrance. It really should be somewhere in the middle of the building, so that way if there's something happening on each end, that the people in the admin area can reach it quickly, they can supervise who's coming and going better, and it's just a much better setup. The other thing that's happening here is that for events like this, the only way to get to this room, the gymnasium, is to go through the corridors and into the gym, but there's no door preventing people from going in other parts of the building. And so, again, from a security standpoint, this is really important, and it's something that's lacking here, and with the current layout of the building, it's not an easy one to solve. On the physical aspects of the building, we started to look at in detail, item by item. I've got a list of 80 issues that I have generated over the last 20 years that I compare every school that I look at to. And so it's a fair side-by-side comparison between different schools and the rules that we have to abide by, like I said, Department of Education. There's also life safety, building code, energy code, just the overall condition of the buildings. I've got this split up into essentially site issues, life safety issues, building code, utilities and services, environmental quality, so basically the quality of the air in the building, the quality of the lighting, the quality of the heating, security, and a number of other issues. So I visited the school, walked every single space in the building, and made a list of all the deficiencies that I saw, and listed that out here. What I discovered was that there was no real smoking gun. There's not one item that is the biggest problem in the building. If I were to say that there was one, I would say it's just the overall condition of the building, that there is needs everywhere. The finishes are in rough shape, the systems are in rough shape, the doors are in rough shape, the cabinets are in rough shape. When you add all that together, it ends up being pretty significant. The other graphic that I've got here is a building code analysis. And again, there's no smoking gun in this exercise either, except that there are some things that need to be repaired. There's a few areas that require additional exits. There are a few technology things that need to happen. But one of the biggest issues is that the second floor, there are 2 stairways, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 classrooms. Based on calculations through the life safety code, the stairways are too small to handle the occupant load for the building. So again, trying to reduce this to a mathematical equation, go to the code and figure out the number of occupants and divide it by a certain number in order to get the ES width, and we're short by a couple of people. So again, not the one issue that's going to make things different here, but it is a contributing factor. So here, what I try to do is to look at, there's a grouping of photographs that show you some of the conditions that I found on this particular slide is on the building envelope. So the outside of the building, the roof, the walls, the windows, the doors. And what you'll see here is that the basic structure of the building is a pretty simple brick and block wall construction with little to no insulation. The windows themselves, if you look really closely at the window, is a steel frame about 1.5 inches thick. So there's no insulation value on there at all. And I believe most of the windows, not all of them, but a lot of them are still semi-cans. So the energy performance of the building is extremely poor compared to newer structures or compared to current building code. We're currently, the 2009 energy conservation code dictates how much insulation we put in walls these days, and compared to that, this is quite a bit behind, and it would take some work to bring it up to speed. The windows themselves, you can see, it's kind of an interesting situation where they used to have glass block above the rim of windows that are down low, and that obviously brought in a lot more natural light, but over the years that's been covered over with wood siding. The wood siding, if you look really carefully, is in block shape. There's a number of areas. There's a board there, there's a board there that are literally popping off and needs to be replaced, basically, all that siding. Again, the siding's in front of glass blocks, so it makes it a pretty unusual condition to try to solve. The other thing that I noticed throughout the building was that there's been a lot of roof leaks, that there's damaged tiles in almost every classroom I went into. I know a lot of the roofs have been upgraded over the past couple of years, but just the damage that it's caused shows you how bad the roof has been over the last few years, and it needs even more repairs as we go forward. This is an example of some of the life safety code issues that I found. Corridors with coats being stored in them, that's not allowed by code. Doorways that don't have the correct fire rating on it. Really old devices that probably still work fine, but at some point they're not going to work and need to be replaced. Just due to the age, they should be replaced. The stairways have some issues in terms of the height and width. And then this one in particular there's a number of spaces in the corridor that were wider when it was originally built. And over time, it seemed to make some sense to utilize those little nooks for some storage. The problem is that they're open to the core, so you have flammable materials being stored in the storage room that has no fire rating to the core. And that's a serious deficiency in the code. Handicap accessibility issues. Not too many significant ones. There's a few areas where there's knob handles still. I believe there's even one in this was in the nurse's room. Areas like this display case, it seems like a nice display case, but it projects out too far into the corridor. If there's a person that's blind and they don't see it, they can run into it and hurt themselves. I received 2 reports in the district that were from structural engineers that looked at the building, and essentially what is happening is that the 2-story classroom wing was originally built as a 1-story, and then the second floor added on. when they added on the second floor, they did not upgrade the structure of what was before the roof was now the floor. And the structural engineering report basically said that the joists were significantly undersized, even at the time it was built, for the loading that's going on. So what's happened is that it deflects, bounces a little bit, and that bouncing movement creates an effect where it causes the subfloor of the plywood to move. And if you go upstairs and look at the flooring, you can see this pattern of boxes in the floor, and that goes all the way down. And basically that's where the plywood is pushing up and cracking the vinyl top. So you can see the evidence of the lack of structure on the floor by just looking at the cracking that's going on. It's not a structural issue where it's going to fall down. It's a structural issue where that bouncing is continuing to occur. It's going to continue to damage the flooring tile and create other effects. So I don't want people to think that the school's unsafe. The code issues and the structural issues, it does not mean the school's unsafe or it's a bad school. It's just when we add all this stuff together to come up with a report to say what needs to happen, it adds to the overall cost and significance. Some other things that are going on is that there's some cracking in the walls, and there's actually some monitoring. Here's at the kindergarten wing, you can see there's a monitoring device up here, and there's the crack that comes down the wall and does that number. What's essentially happening is that when the kindergarten addition was put onto the existing building, you've got a sort of hammerhead at the end of a long corridor. That corridor continues to expand and contract, and every time it does, it cracks this wall more. It won't ever stop because when these two walls were put together, you can see where the concrete block was just kind of blended into the concrete of the wall. There should have been a control joint there to allow the two buildings to move. So these cracks are going to continue. There's cracks in some other areas of the building that are just due to age settlement. The heating system has a lot of issues that need to be addressed. The full report that I gave the board, which has a copy, has also another report inside it by Yet Associates. They're mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers. And they have their own list of issues that I've included in the full report. But here's just a few examples. That most of the building is ventilated through unit ventilators. So that means that there's a cabinet in each classroom that ventilates directly to the outside. Those are designed for a very specific purpose, and really you can't modify it. But there's a classroom, I believe this is in one of the special ed classrooms near the main office, where the cabinet was actually built over. So there's a wall on top of it, and part of the cabinet is in one room, part of the cabinet is in the other room. So there's no possible way to actually control what's happening in both those rooms, because the controls for that particular cabinet heater is in this room, and that leaves the other room without. There's areas of just simply too much storage and blocking heat registers, too much storage and blocking ventilation. And upstairs in the classroom wing, there's some areas where just the age of the pipes, the systems that they use, create these areas where there's a relief valve. Those things get very hot, and they're exposed through the thin tube covers. So there's some safety issues going on with that. Outside of that, some of the bigger items that, showing a picture wouldn't really explain is the just age of the boilers, the age of the mechanical systems, the age of the lighting systems. A lot of these systems are past their prime. Finishes. Actually, no, this one's on plumbing itself. Now, some of the plumbing does not meet handicap code. Essentially, you're required to have at least one urinal in every boys' bathroom to be handicap accessible. There are handicap accessible toilets, although they don't meet the current ADA, which requires additional grab bars. And you see the sinks also as well have some issues in terms of accessories and heights. The general age of the sinks are reaching their expected life cycle. Electrical. Electrical is one area that I found some things that, I know that there's been a lot of improvements on it recently. There's been added circuits for technology and things of that nature, but it's like any old building. My house suffers the same thing. You add something here, you add something here, you add something here, and next thing you know, it's like a spaghetti, things crossing each other and not quite working. Even with the added outlets, you can see that there's still a lot of daisy chains, extension cords, and things of that nature. There's a lot of areas where there's missing outlet covers or exposed wiring. There's a lot of areas where the fixtures are damaged and exposed. Finishes. Finishes is one of the areas that I found surprising in two ways. First of all, that they haven't really been upgraded for a long, long time. So after 50 years, they need to be upgraded. The other thing that occurred to me after I finished the report was just how expensive some of these finishes are. So when you think about, well, it just needs new floors. But when you're talking about 50,000 square foot building at $4 a square foot, it adds up pretty quick. You can see some of the evidence of that is the plastic laminate countertops. There's many of them that are delaminating and pulling up. It creates a health issue in terms of keeping it clean and also the sharp edges. You've got areas where the base and the flooring. We already talked about the flooring cracking quite a bit. It's in rough shape. There's a number of areas where the flooring is missing entirely, particularly around cabinets, where the cabinets have been taken out. And what's left in the classroom is simply raw plywood. Cases of the carpet just being past its prime and needing to be replaced. And one of the biggest things was the doorways. You go upstairs in the classroom wing and look at the doors. The doors have delaminated. They're at an age where the glue has failed and there are pieces of wood coming off of it. And you can see areas. This is not actually a good picture of it, but you can see areas where there's pieces, chunks of the doors that are missing, like significant chunks. So really, all the doors in the building are at a point where they need to be replaced. Some of them being, very serious. So once I had the basic report completed, we had a list of deficiencies. We knew what was to happen. We also had the program, and we knew what space needs were required, what areas were deficient, what areas were good. Talking with the superintendent and the school board, came up with 3 basic options and trying to compare each of them as fairly as possible. So the first one was, can we renovate and basically pay as you go? So let's take 5 years and take 20% of the work and do 20% each year for 5 years to get to the 100% where we need to be. Second option is, well, what if we did all that, additions and renovations, all in 1 year, and just get it done and go forward? Obviously, that would have to be a bonded project, whereas the pay-as-you-go, you probably just do it through the budget. And then option 3 is new construction. What's the positives, what's the negatives on doing new construction? And again, I just want to point out that all 3 of these options, going into this, we went in with no favoritism and wanted to compare each as equally as possible. So if there's a 6,000 square foot gym in the new construction, there should be a 6,000 square foot gym in the additions. If we're putting in, all new floor in one, we're putting in all new floor in the other. So this is an equal comparison. You might say, well, we don't need to put new floors down, and that would affect, those options. So if we say that, a particular item is a $12 million project, if you don't do the floor, it's going to bring down the cost. If you don't do the gym, it's going to bring down the cost. And so you can pick and choose where you want to go with it, but for this exercise, everything's equal so that you can see the differences. Now, I'm estimating based on current trends. Again, been doing a lot of schools the past 20 years, and so there's always been a certain figure that we design to. It's usually relatively close. This year, things have kind of gotten a little crazy because a lot of contractors are very busy. We've got changes happening in the marketplace. I don't know if anybody's heard about the steel tariffs, but they've caused the cost of steel to go up by 30% this year. That affects mechanical systems, it affects electrical systems, it affects the structure of the building. And so I just want to put a disclaimer out there that the cost figures I showed you tonight are a wild guess for today and probably out the window in a couple of years. But that doesn't matter. The difference between these different options is not going to change significantly. It's not going to make one more costly than the other. It's not going to change it that way. They'll still be relatively in the same category. So, the first challenge that I had in coming up with these three is how can I get this site to meet Department of Education standards? I really struggled with that because it is so tight. I couldn't find space on the property to fit a bus loop and a car loop. Till finally the other day, I came across an idea that the only way to do that is this current smaller loop here, car loop, if we extended it all the way across in the front of the school, it would create a very good parent pick-up and drop-off zone, and then we could add parking along that entire length and gain all the parking needs that we have. Obvious problem to that is that it would go straight through the administration and music hall. But in the report, it showed that the administration is not in a good spot, and it's undersized. So it seemed to me that it was a good sacrifice to take down those two parts of the building and extend the driveway through that so we can get the students off the street and in a safe zone on school property. Then I had to solve how to get the bus loop to work, because you can't have the bus loop in the same loop as the cars. So what I'm suggesting is that we come in on the backside with a bus loop here that exits out that way. So that way you can get the buses off the street, away from the cars. The problem becomes is if you've got you've got the same loop or even two loops next to each other. You've got a parent waiting for a student on one side, and the kids are going to run through the buses in order to get there, or vice versa. You have to have them separated. So by having the cars in front and the buses in the back, it's a safe and efficient way of delivering transportation to build. So what do we do with the administration? As I was saying earlier, the best location for the administration area is in the middle of the building. It's also in the middle of where you would be picking up and dropping off. So you've got this loop here where the students are going to be coming and going, and where all your parents are going to be coming and going. It's where your visitors would park to reach the front entrance. And from this one location, there's visibility in all directions. So from a safety standpoint, from a logistics standpoint, from a supervision standpoint, that's the place that administration really wants to be in this building. From there, there's a few other areas that we need to correct, including, obviously we're also taking out the music room, and the library is in portals, so it's not a permanent structure to begin with. So we need to relocate those areas inside the building. So we've got two other zones designated as potential additions to the building where these would go. So let me get into the inside of the building a little bit and kind of explain the thought process there. So again, you've got the front entrance in the middle of the building, right off the main office. And I've also dedicated the space next to that as a library. So this lobby right here ends up being a secure lobby. Anybody visiting the school would not be able to get past the front door without checking in. So they literally come in, check in, go into the office, and then go out of the office back in the corridor in order to get where they're going. If you're a teacher, you probably have a key fob pass that you can go through a locked door. But if you're a visitor, the only way to get into the building is through the main office, through the front lines. Now, if there's, say, a school board meeting, and you've got members coming in that school board meeting's in the library, they could come through the library, but we would lock doors up to prevent them from going into the rest of the building. If there's, say, other night events like men's league that wants to use the gymnasium, we can have access for those people off of the main corridor because we've got the existing toilet rooms right off the intersection behind the main office and behind the library. So we can give people access to what they need, basically access to space and access to the toilet rooms, with that centered entranceway in the building. Now the next thing is the largest space deficiency in the report is the gymnasium. I know you folks have been living with it for a good number of years and probably have come accustomed to it, but the Department of Education has a list of the sizes they expect to see a gymnasium, and this is about 1/2 of what it should be. Curious enough, it's actually exactly the right size it should be for cafeteria. Looking at the old plans and the fact that the kitchen is right there next to it, I'm assuming that maybe back in the day this was gym and caf. And to me, that kind of makes some sense. So the solution, I think, is to build a new gymnasium to the side of this building, this structure, and to demolish the cafeteria. And what that does, if you go back to the site plan, it frees up some room in the back where we're trying to bring the buses. And what it also does is, like I said, this corridor coming through, and I'm not drawing it very well, ends up being the public corridor. There would be locked doors on either wing, so that way you can get in from the front entrance to this corridor system, get to the toilets, get to the office, get to the library, get to the caf, get to the gymnasium, and nowhere else in the building. So again, trying to make safety and security one of the #1 priorities in any kind of school design. From there, I mentioned that the code study that I did was suggesting we need a third way out of the second floor. And so that addition with the gym would also include a stairway right in that location between the gym and the caf. Gives a good access for the upper floors to get down to the caf without having to go down one end or the other. It's centrally located, heads out to the playgrounds and bus loop in the back. It seems to make some sense in terms of logistics, and it certainly helps us a lot with the code. Music and art, those are the next largest spaces that need to be addressed. And it occurred to me there that there are 4 classrooms at this end of the building that are somewhat oddly shaped right now. They're sort of pie-shaped. If we took out the angled wall in between, those 2 rooms are almost exactly the size that art and music should be. The current music room is in this small room here, which is well under the size that the Department of Education looks for in a music room. So by doing that, we create almost sort of an art wing to the building. The end of the building ends up with music and art. And music now, instead of being buried inside the building, where there might be a lot of noise, is now at the end of the building where the noise isn't going to bother anybody. What I did with the leftover space is, basically the smaller rooms become either small group, special ed. There was a need in one of the reports I saw for PTO usage, things of that nature. Some of these things could shift in the future. This is just one concept that I'm trying to make sure works. So the other thing that I try to do is to look at the classrooms. The current trend in educational design is to group classrooms by grade and to create zones where the teachers and the students can kind of cross-pollinate throughout the day. And so you'll see on here these pinkish squares And what they're doing is just identifying areas where we can connect doorways in order to enhance those groupings. So that if, say, the second grade were to be team teaching, there's a cluster of classrooms that work together, and that we would endeavor to design those to have, not just near proximity, but actually make it clear to the students and the teachers where they are. They're in the second grade team, and they would have their own space and be able to identify them. So I've been able to group, obviously kindergartens were already laid out. I grouped the first grade together, the second grade together, third grade together, fourth grade. Fifth and sixth are kind of at the end of the double-loaded corridor, and we're a little harder to group, but still together in a larger grouping itself. So that's sort of the thought process. Again, I want to state that this is not a final plan. It is a plan that I believe works. I believe it works well for education. I believe it works well for security. And in many ways works well in terms of construction, because there's a clear, I can see a clear path in order to be able to build these things. Not to say that there's not some challenges there. I'll get into that in a second. So, where those challenges really come out is the cost. You can build anything as long as you have a plan. So again, back to the three concepts that we came up with, and again, these are numbers that just order of magnitude. That's all. Option one: renovate over 5 years. The worksheet that I worked up, one of the challenges here was that there's a number of items that have a really high need. And there's also a number of items that can't exist without other items being done. I'll give you an example. If the floor loading on the second floor of the classroom were to be solved, the best way to solve that is to basically add structural steel. Currently, there are bar joists, metal bar joists that are 4 feet on center or somewhere in that vicinity that go down the length of the building. So the easiest thing would be to buy more of those same bar joists and put more of them between the existing ones that are there. Seems simple until you start to think about how do we do that? Well, all the ceilings have to come down first. So we add to the list, replace the ceilings. Second thing is that there's ductwork, electrical, lighting, fire alarm systems, Cat5 cabling. All that would have to come out in order to get the bar joists up. So we're replacing not just bar joists, we're replacing ceilings and lighting and mechanical and electrical. Just one item has just caused us to spend a lot more than what we were expecting. So what I came up with was trying to group some of those things together so that they made some sense. The first year you're spending like $2.5 million. The second year it's more like 1.5, and then it trickles down to about $1 million by the time you get to year 5. By the time you get to year 5, you've spent about $9.5 million. Because it's an old building, I don't know if anybody owns an old house. Once you renovate it, you still have an old house, and there's still stuff that needs to get fixed. And so as much as I try to bring that option one up to the same level as new construction, there's certain things that just can't be done, or just don't make any sense to do it at the time. But the clock is ticking. As soon as you build it, there's going to be more things that come along. And so that $1 million at year 5 might reduce down to $500,000, but it's not going to go away. You're still going to be spending a little bit of money every year for a long, long time. Option number 2, additions and renovations in 1 year. The reason why this is so attractive is twofold. First of all, you get it all done at once, and you don't have to keep going back and getting more money each and every year. So you can enjoy a fixed-up building right away and not have to put up with construction for 5 years. The other thing is that with the inflation that I talked about, it being so high, in the past 10 years, inflation, I went on to the Consumer Price Index and actually looked at it. Inflation for construction specifically, for the last 10 or 15 years, it's only been 1, 2, maybe 3%. This last year was 5%. This year, it's going to be more than that. And so each year you wait add 5 to 10% to the cost. So if you're going to renovate over 5 years, you're adding potentially another 25% into the cost just because of inflation. If you renovate it in 1 year, you have to pay a bond, which includes interest, which currently is about 3%, maybe even less than that. I've seen some projects come in at 2 something. So just by doing it in 1 year, you're going to save money by beating inflation. The other challenge, the biggest challenge though with option 2, the additions and renovations, is how do you do it? How do you do it in 1 year? Because every corner of the building is renovated. So do you rent a school someplace else, move all your kids for a year while the renovations is going on? Generally what you do, what I've done in the past on similar projects, is to build a new construction first, move the students in there, and then renovate the areas that have been vacated, and then move other students into those areas and renovate those areas. The problem here is that there's not really a huge need for new construction. There's a few, obviously the core facilities. I want to back up just a second to talk about that. All the yellow areas are what we call the core facilities. That's what the greatest space needs are, is for the core facilities, not the classrooms. So when we talk about the cost, we talk about moving people around. Let me go back to this. Oops, sorry. We've got this as an addition, and we've got the opposite addition. You're not going to put students in the office. You could possibly divide the gymnasium up and put 8 classrooms in there, and then move students out of this wing into the gym while you renovate that, and then do the same thing here. Move these students over and renovate over here. But it's going to take multiple years to do that. You can't do that all at once. So even though I say this is renovate in 1 year plan, it's really 2+ years. And the logistics of doing that are going to increase your cost because of just the time constraints, how long it's going to take, and the fussiness of keeping the site safe while you've got construction vehicles and kids at the same time on the same site. Option number 3 is pretty attractive because this school stays exactly as it is, running, no disruption to education while new school is being built. And then you move the students over, open up the doors, and you're ready to go. The downsides to it, it's more expensive. It's going to be more expensive. But by how much? Kind of hard to say. I'm saying about 50% more expensive. What you get, though, is a new school. So you don't have the old building that's going to continue to have problems that you're going to continue to fix. You're going to have new construction that's going to be energy efficient. It's going to be easy to maintain. It's going to be easy to operate, less costly to operate. And so those fixes, as soon as you build a building, the floors start wearing out. But it takes 20 years to do that. So with a new building, you know when those things are going to wear out. Whereas with this building, there's so many different ages, it's just a constant keeping track. So the biggest downside to it is the cost, but there's a lot of positives, so you go way back and forth what's important to you as far as that goes. I did not do a life cycle cost analysis. I find them too difficult because I don't know what the cost of energy is going to be. I don't know what the weather is going to do. And so, when I say that a new construction is going to be a lot more energy efficient, I know that empirically because the projects we've done, but I can't tell you an exact figure. I can't tell you if that's going to exceed the cost difference between the different options. So I see a lot of stunned faces. And that's basically the end of the presentation. I'm hoping what I've said is that there's a lot of background data to how we got here. And I didn't want to keep this going for hours by going through each and every item that we came up with. There's full reports. I gave the school board 12 copies, and I think everybody got a handout that shows the plans. And my goal here was not just to thrust the plan at you, but to let you understand the thought process in coming up with it. And hopefully that helps people to understand the issues. So open it up for questions, Madam Chair, is that okay?
Sure. Any questions?
Back in the back row.
If option 3 were to be considered, where would the new building be built?
Well, there was a study a few years ago that looked at a new building on a new site, and from what I understand, that site's still built.
What's the functional capacity of the building now versus the enrollment?
Oh, good question, and I do have that answer, and that is my question. So the educational capacity is actually not much different than what we do doing. Right now, you've got 20 classrooms and you need 20 classrooms. But it's the core capacity. So the size of the gymnasium, the size of the library, the administration, it basically, you're going to feel the space needs sooner in those areas. So basically, I did a calculation, came up with, 388 for the core capacity.
What's the projected enrollment over, say, the next 10 to 20 years?
So there's a sheet on enrollment projections, and I do, so there was a, that's it does the enrollment projections for the I redo them because I'm not looking at the total. I want to know per grade how many students are coming through. So I do a working, figure it out per grade, and I look at the trends, and I look at what the peak is. So that way I know, particularly for the core capacity, what we're dealing with. I believe now the total enrollments are on the decline. They've been on the decline. And there's a lot of reasons for that. They're on the decline nationally, particularly. And the basic reason for that is the parents. Baby boomers were the largest cohort out there, and they're retiring but not having kids. Their kids are actually just gone through the system and graduated and they're in college. So they're basically millennials and a little younger. The in-between crowd is a smaller cohort, and they're having representatively smaller number of kids. So when the baby boom children hit age where they start having kids, you're going to see an uptick in enrollment. That could be 10, 15 years down the pipe. But my prediction is that enrollment will flatten out and will start to increase over the next 5 to 10 years. There's another thing going on with that, and that's economics. If you look at the enrollment projections, you can see a trend in terms of loss of enrollments. So basically, first grade to second grade, you generally lose 1 or 2 people. And the same thing, second grade to third grade. It's sort of a trend in the decline. That generally, when that happens, it's usually an economic base. Once a town sort of revitalizes and more people start moving in, you'll see that come back again. So I'm seeing the decline in enrollments for this school is as being a temporary trend and not permanent. So we basically have designed all these systems for about 400 students.
You went with option 1. What would the life cycle of that option be? Would it be 15 years, 20 years?
I think the best way I can describe it is it's going to be a rolling thing. That it's just going to be every year there's going to be something that wears out and you have to replace. Whereas if you built option 3, brand new, you know that you're good for the first 5 years because all the building materials are going to last at least 5 years. Most building materials last 20 to 30.
If you went, say, still with option 1, 20 years from now, would this building still be here? Or, not saying we're going to have a fire or anything like that. Would that building
I
still?
left my crystal ball at home, but it's a block and steel building. It is not designed to today's seismic load. People think, well, New Hampshire, we don't get earthquakes. Well, we do on a fairly regular basis. And the difference with New Hampshire is that unlike California, that gets big ones all the time, we only get a big one every few hundred years. So we just don't have the memory to remember the last big earthquake that happened. If there were one to happen here, we would lose some substantial buildings. And you don't want that to be a street. You really don't. The other thing is that we know from the structural reports that even the floor arches and roof arches aren't designed to current standards. There was a report by the structural engineers in 2000 that actually went out and measured how much snow every town got throughout the state. And they put together a list and they calculated how much weight that is. And basically, it was double what the building codes at the time required. So we know that most schools in the state are under-designed for snow loading, and that is true here. You had a question?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions about the renovation.
Sure.
After it would be complete, what happens to our playground space? Like, that looks like a
Yeah.
significant reduction.
I kind of paved right over it, didn't I?
Yeah.
And, I feel bad about that, but, I thought the safety came first, and I thought maybe the playground could be redeveloped up on the hillside. We mean students having to go up onto that. I think right now there is a play field that's up higher, you have to get to some play structures. But yeah, we have to find some new space for that. Another thought was that, keeping some of the paved area on the inside of the bus loop, and that way the students aren't crossing the loop. But think about it, the bus loop itself is, you could put a gate across that and say, after the buses leave at say 9 o'clock, you put a gate up and that whole area is free. The students could be playing on the bus loop. So we could have, Bedford has it, New Ipswich has it, we've done that in some areas where you make that safe zone, and the students can play on the paved area that doubles as a bus loop.
And my other question was, after your first assessment, you said, we had plenty of classroom space, but what we were lacking was offices for like speech, OT, things like that. Did you find enough space in the renovation?
I'll admit that I didn't spell out every one of those spaces in that proposed design, and in fact, probably need to find a few more. But the total figure, some of those spaces are fairly small and can fit in, hate to say it, but basically the leftover spaces. One of the things, if you look back at the plan, the coloring of it, I try to show graphically how things were distributed. So the core facilities, the offices, library, gym, CAP, are all in one spot. That's really important. But when you look at the special ed programs, they're spread throughout the building. Right now, if you look at the existing use diagram, they're all at one end of the building. So if you get a special needs student, they have to go to the special ed room. But if they're spread throughout the building, it's not that, what's the word, stigma. So that was something I was very intentionally looking for, is to try to spread out the special ed program.
I know that the focus was to be able to show how to fix this.
Yeah.
But did you happen to bring an example of a school that would, if you were to build a new one, it would also be able to hold 400 students? Just did you bring a slide of like an example of what something like that might look like?
I could. I didn't want to tonight because I didn't want to muddy the waters and make it seem like I'm trying to push you to school. That is not it at all. I'm trying to make sure that this is a fair comparison between options. So if the school board wants to, consider that some future meeting, I can certainly show you all sorts of examples of what we do, including the plan that was presented here for Littleton a few years ago.
And there are intangibles with building something that's new, building something that's new. You get to set everything right. Even the safety standards, if we make renovations here, you'll improve the safety standards, but they wouldn't be as good as you build in your school. And storage, you've got stuff in the corridors, you've got flammables in the corridors, infrared stairways. With a new building, you build all of those things into it. And at least over years, it'll get cluttered again because everything does. But at least for 5-10 years, it'll be really nice. It's just like having a nice new car. Is there any way to measure those intangibles, put some value to having the right size for the special education, for the special things?
There's no metric for that, but what you're saying is absolutely right. If we're building new, we can design it exactly the way that we want. Working with an existing building, we're having to work within the confines of as much as we can for the existing building. And what happens is, I think what you're getting at is something I call functional obsolescence. If you have a building that was designed for a certain purpose, and you repurpose it for something else, there's going to be areas that you just can't use, or you can't use effectively. That loss of effectiveness is that functional obsolescence. And I could probably quantify it with just space needs. You know, if well, and you know, good point. I have not included that in the cost of the plan. Basically, I came up with a space needs worksheet that's dictated how many square feet a new building would take. I compared that to the existing, and I said, all right, we're going to build up to that amount. But I didn't factor in that there could be a loss of efficiency. So if we need 60,000 square feet, we probably have to build, if it's here, 65,000 square feet in order to have 60,000 square feet using this space. So that's a good point. I should probably incorporate that in some of the lettering reports.
And I'm assuming that these life safety things that you've identified will now be corrected, like the electrical outlets, the valves that
Yes.
will be corrected when the students come back in September?
And when? Oh.
When the students come back in September? My point is, I've been through hundreds of OSHA,
Yeah.
in the industry. We now know what these things are, you just made them public. We better fix them before the students come back. We can't do it. It's not right, it's not legal.
Yeah. I worked on a study very similar to this on the school the month after Sandy. And one of the first things I noticed that the front door opened up to the first door on the right was the kindergarten. And then to get to the main office, you had to go down the corridor and around to the right. So the front office couldn't even see who was coming in. They had cameras, but you get someone with a hoodie and a baseball cap, you know, want to come in, or with a package like they're delivering something. They're going to let them in, and right there is kindergarten. You know, I was astounded, and so I brought it up and I said exactly that. You know, you guys aren't noticing that. It's 10 years. You know, when we're saying 10 years ago, they haven't done it. So.
Well, I think we'll be better than that, about the electrical outlets, the scalding hazards, things like that.
And you know, I sometimes come out sounding like the angel of doom here. That I'm telling you, I'm airing your dirty laundry when it comes to the building, and I feel bad about it because the maintenance people, the teachers, the school board, everybody working here does the best they can to do the opposite, to show the public that they're doing everything that they can to make this school as good a place as possible. And then I come along and make it sound awful. I feel bad about that, but I can't do anything else, because I have to say what's in the codes, I have to say what Department of Education. What you ultimately do with that information is the teachers.
And then my final point, I'm sorry for taking so much time, is there any consideration for what this building will provide for education of the future? Taking technology and taking the next turn into what can we do with technology that the new school couldn't do here. We were limited because of the function. And is there any way to measure just the benefit of how we can educate students with space and technology?
Yeah.
The new building will provide.
As far as the layout goes, well, as far as technology in general, things are changing so fast that we can't predict what's going to happen 2 years from now, or like 10, 15 years from now. The layout of the building, I think we've gone through a lot of phases. Back in the early part of the last century, schools were smaller, and K through 8 would be in an 8-room schoolhouse. And then it changed to the 1950s when this was built, and I call it the Henry Ford design, because you had just one quarter down the middle, classrooms off of it. It's really very nondescript. And then in the last 15 years, we've seen a shift towards collaboration, where students within the classroom, but also between other classrooms. You've got team teaching, you've got learning collaboratives. Places creative places inside the building where students and teachers can get together. I designed a school down near Peterborough where we did all the classrooms around an open court. And there's a space up the size of a half classroom where you can just sit and be if you want to. And, they asked me, what is the space for? I'm like, I don't know, whatever you folks want to do with it. And so I've visited several times since then, and every time there's something different happening in that commons area. Sometimes it's students reading by themselves. They found out that giving a student a book, setting them out in the corridor, they loved that. They felt really special by being able to be out there. But it's in an open court, so it's not like they're not seeing things. Another thing that happened was I was there once, and there's a group of 5 teachers that were all talking. As soon as they saw us, they scattered, like they weren't supposed to be out there. But the fact is that they're using the space in an unscheduled, impromptu way. And it's exactly what we were planning on. They've had reading specialists come in and do like the presentation. They've had artists come in and put stuff up on the wall. So, I think that is the trend in education. And you saw the pink boxes I put up. That's trying to bring us towards that, but there's no way I'd be able to actually fit the kind of spaces that you can in a new building and make it work the way we want to.
Thank you.
On option 1,
Yeah.
years 1 through 5, what's your total cost for option 1 through 5? For the first 5 years?
Somewhere between 9 and 9.
And then for the next 15 years after that, we'd still be putting money into it. So what would you pretend would be the cost each year? 10%? Just pretend.
I want to pretend a little bit harder and come back with something.
So the original 5 years would be a total of?
First 5 years would be somewhere between 9 and 9.
Okay. But we'll still be having, for the next 15 years, if we built a new building, we knew we probably wouldn't be doing anything for 15 or 20 years.
Right.
But if we put $7 or $9 million in 5 years, we're still going to be putting in $400,000 for the next 15 years, maybe. Is that pretending too much?
No, I think
So is that $2 million? So how much is that? Is that $2 million? $3 million over the next 15 years. So if we still have a leaky boat, we just have to be patching all the time.
Right, and just like I said, I have an old house, it's 120 years old, and I renovated that when I first moved in, and now I'm renovating those renovations. So it's the same thing. This building is a few things that are fairly new, like the cooling system that's on the second floor of the classroom wing. But it's also an example of how bad the insulation is that it's overheating. So it's, what do you fix first? And what I worry about is throwing good money after that. And that, you don't fix the insulation of the walls, and then you put it in a really high-end mechanical system, you just wasted half the money in it. And how do I calculate something like that? It's the functional obsolescence of one mechanics. Yes.
What is the requirement for the student population, or the size of the property? If we were to build a school, what would the acreage?
Sure. It's start with 5 acres, and then you add an acre for every 100 students. So if you're designing for 400 students, you want 9 acres.
And we currently have how much here that is actually functioning?
You want 9 that is buildable, but even though this property is 5, because of the steep slopes and whatnot, it's probably
I think I remember long ago when I was on the school board, the actual elevation at the back end of the property is almost equal to 12 stories. So, it's correct. And so, if we were to look at building, renovating, and even trying to prepare for the future, we really don't have a lot of space to build out or to have ball fields. If the state starts to make changes to physical education requirements, we have no space for fields, no space for other things. So I just wanted to kind of make that comment that we really don't have a lot of room here for expansion and or for even increasing the play area. students.
Absolutely. And that's the challenge that I've had in coming up with this design.
With your new design, does it account for enough parking for all of us, or will we still need to rent our parking spaces?
Good question. I basically maxed out what I could. And so there's, I believe, 40 spaces in that front loop, and then another 20, another 20 where the portal goes.
Well,
Oh, and this 20 on that side.
but is that, just to follow up on that, how much do we pay for leasing parking space currently?
22,000.
22,000?
13 for one lot and 9 for the other.
Good question.
Yeah, when you look at your options there, and you go from option 2 to option 3, it actually sounds like a really good deal. But you're talking about not this property, you're talking about building on another piece of property. Now, that property may be at the end of Oak Hill Avenue, where the school at one time wanted to build the elementary school. There's no water, there's no power, there's no roads, there's nothing out there. So we gotta redo all the infrastructure. You gotta build a new playground, which we have a playground here. So there's a lot more to a brand new building than 18 million.
Well,
So when we go to sell it to the taxpayers, we gotta be a lot more realistic in the amount that it's gonna cost for a new location.
it's a really good point. I did account for some of that in that I did school, it was on a brand new piece of property that had no services and whatnot, and so I used some of that data. So basically, I got $1 million in that $18 million budget just for site development. So there's some of that, but I think the point is that we don't know until we actually design the site what that cost is going to be. And so 18 could turn into 20 or go down to
23 or
Yeah.
who knows?
You know,
Or it could go down.
these numbers are really just based, trying to get, what levels we're at.
But if you were to redo the renovations here, those numbers right now would be a lot more accurate than building a new building somewhere else. I mean, if $12 million to regenerate and do this building all at once, 12 million is probably good enough.
I hope I did a good job, and it's in the right ballpark. Now, one of the things that, thinking on the drive up here, that could change that is that with renovation projects, sometimes you don't find stuff until you start tearing it up. So you open up walls and you discover asbestos, you discover, there could be other things that cost a lot of money that we don't know. So I included in these numbers pretty high contingencies in order to cover those costs. But, I think there's some similar things that can happen, with the new school, without the design, we don't know what the cost is, but, without really getting into the here, renovations can often cause even higher cost increases. So again, my point is, I think that, either one of those could go up or down, and I don't think one over the other is more susceptible. If that makes sense.
And it's not physically possible to do it all in 1 year because of moving the students around to make it work.
What's the actual reality of moving 371 kids around here while you're doing all those renovations?
Well, I've done it before,
Ish.
so it's possible. It's costly and it's disruptive to education, but I worked on the middle school in Wayne. If you're familiar with that building, the original building was a wood frame 3-story structure. It had an addition that wrapped around it in a donut with a gymnasium at one end. And we tore down one wing of the building and rebuilt a new school, and then tore down the rest of it and rebuilt that part of it. And so an entire new structure on the same site in 1 year. So it's possible. It's possible. It wasn't easy. I'll put it that way. We literally had concrete block walls 2 feet away from the windows in the existing building. So you had people testing with masons up there putting them on. Yeah.
Did your option 1 and option 2 address all of the issues that you saw on your list? Is all of those issues taken care of?
Yes and no.
Like fixtures, electrical,
Well, one of
HVAC.
the things I thought of on the ride up here, of course, got the report done, and as soon as I printed it, I'm finding mistakes and reprinting stuff. And one of the things that I think I missed was the installation. So there could be some things in this like that. Again, they're pretty heavy to some of the numbers, so I think 12 months still is applicable. But answer your question is there could be more things that we discovered, things that I've missed, and or
But the
Yeah,
goal,
things we
you
don't
said,
know.
was to make them apples to apples.
the goal was to make them apples to apples. And I think I come first.
Mine's a square footage question.
Yeah.
You gave us square footage for this building currently at the beginning, 15,000 square feet.
It's about 50,000 square feet.
So was looking at your plans and you've added core spaces.
Yeah.
What is the educational square footage? Because from my perspective, it looks like we're losing some education space in the renovation. Because the portables, you've taken the library out of there and located it, but there are 2 classrooms out there also.
Right. Well, it kind of goes back to the question that was about the specials classrooms, special needs spaces. There's a lot of spaces that I didn't study in terms of its exact location because I was only looking to get a broad picture view of what was going on. So yeah, you may have picked up on some spaces that might have been missing. The intent is that the total cost that I've presented would be enough to eventually solve all the problems.
So I'm looking at the pictures that you've given us and presenting information to the town.
Yeah.
And what we have currently in the building, and then the footprint that we have, and then the renovation with the footprint that we have, doesn't give us the same educational space. And then on top of, from my perspective, and then on top of it, the extra cost of leveling out the backfill for the playground and all those other things that we mentioned earlier.
Right. It's a good point. There could be some things that I missed. Again, I was just looking at a broader picture, but I think you're right that before it gets to a point of people voting on it, they would need to know more specifically each and every room is going to go to. Good point.
This is really for the school board. No, wait for Madam Chair. This is really for the school board. The question is really for the school board. What is your thoughts on the process of determining which direction you're going in the timeline? Soon. Go ahead. What's the next step?
Our goal is to get as much information out as possible, so that we not only can discuss it, but that we can discuss it with our neighbors and friends and have that open conversation about what's going to be the best thing for the students and the town.
The biggest thing comes down to voting time.
Mhm.
And if we get enough of the information out to the community, to know the options, and then the community can help us as a school board make the right decision for the community, then when it comes to voting time, the hope is that we have enough votes to move in one of these 3 directions. If the town community comes together and says, option 1 is the way we want to go, it may not be what everybody in the community wants, but if that's the loudest voice, then we've got to move on something. We can't just year after year keep putting Band-Aids. So whether everybody in this room doesn't like option 1 and 2, if the whole of our community comes to the voting time and votes for option 1 or 2, we're stuck with what we're given. We've got to come with enough information back to our community to help the community come back at voting time and help us make that decision.
So,
I just think we need to hear from the community. Why we're having this type of meeting is to get this information out to the community, to hear back, and that you too can spread it out to the other communities and help other people that are asking these questions as to why do we need a new Lakeway, or why are they talking about building a new Lakeway versus repairing? I think if we don't get that information out, then our community doesn't understand why we want to do this in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's great what you've done tonight, so thank you very much, and thank you to everybody who came tonight. It's really nice to see that, but I guess My question is, and you may not know this yet, so you're considering putting all three of these on the ballot rather than making a decision?
No, I think
Okay.
before we get on to the ballot, we need to
Gotcha.
see
So
where the
you're gonna-
community is
you're gonna-
pushing.
Yeah, and so, next question is the report available on the website, the detailed report? Or are you considering making that available?
Report, yeah.
Yes.
It's out there, okay.
It's not there, but it will, because actually the full report, we just got the full final report, but yes, absolutely.
So that'll be really helpful, I
Yep.
think, to put that out. And are you, as you move forward, seeking feedback from the community? I guess maybe that's what I'm wondering, do you have a process in mind for that, or how will you make that public? Or how do you want people to call you, or what are you thinking?
I think the board needs to discuss that, but I
Yeah.
mean, if they want to call in the board members, send us an email, what they're thinking, we'll put them all together.
This is the first step.
Yeah.
This is the
Right.
first step
Of
of a
many.
multi-layered process.
And we'll probably have more meetings, so. Jerry, you have something?
Yeah, we had a demonstration tonight on the latest educational philosophy of universal design.
Sure.
Okay, now, our classrooms here, are they functional for universal design? Are they big enough, or the right shape, or the right size?
Well, so, yes and no. Much like everything else in this building, the way that it's sort of organically grown over time, when you look at the plan, it is very disconnected. I think the universal design issues are much the same. It's not that it doesn't meet it, it's just done in a very inelegant way. So if I were doing it new, it would be very transparent. You walk into a classroom and everything's handicap accessible for all different types of disabilities, but you don't notice it. There's not a handicap thing to sit at. So there's those type of things that it's kind of hard to answer the question.
Yeah, because that seems to be the direction that the administration and the teachers want to go in, is toward universal design.
Absolutely.
And we need a building that would have to be functional for that. We just can't use the square little classroom and think that's going to work.
In my mind, the size of the rooms are actually appropriate, 900 square feet, roughly plus. And that seems to be sort of the atom of education design. But what goes on inside there, and then how those classrooms relate to other classrooms is what's really changing. And so trying to keep up with that is a little more of a challenge, and it's very much a challenge when you've got a double-loaded Henry Ford style classroom or court. You need to start blowing those out so you can have the collaborative areas that are accessible for everyone.
I agree.
Other sort of
I would find it helpful just to try to make a decision as this rolls out, some projection of the cost over every year. We'll talk about spending another $500,000 or $1 million with 15 years on this building. That really adds up. And if we just look, if we make a decision just on those, the three numbers as such, the first number has, fixing this building has the cost of, that we're agreeing that we'll fix it, but then each year we're going to spend another $500,000. So over 15 years, that got a lot of money in terms of what we will be required to pay in taxes. So some type of an analysis of the bond for $18 million, that's what it costs. What would the expense of paying that bond off, and how would that affect our taxes? And do some type of realistic projection of what the cost would be as taxpayers into the town over the next 15 years. And that would certainly help me make that decision.
And I've seen that with other districts, and I think we were talking about that earlier. It's like, all right, what's that cost going to be? And I can try to come up with some educated guess as to what that would be. You know, we can look at, say, gym form. It lasts, 30 years, because, so each time you sand it, it takes a little bit of wood off, and pretty soon it'll get exposed to the top. So we can estimate how long that's going to be, and then we can say, all right, in the year 20 years, we're going to replace the gym floor. When you think about all the systems and all the materials and all the pieces and parts, there's a million pieces in school like this, and to try to figure each one of those out down to fine print is going to be really tough. The other thing too is that I don't know how often you sand the floor, and I don't know how long the structure is going to hold. There's certain elements that might last 10 years, it might last 80 years. It's just hard to say. So we can come up with some general thoughts on it, but anything in terms of that part of that future is yes.
Do you know if there's any state aid available for new construction at this time?
I know that there's none. But here's what's happening, as far as I know, the school board and the superintendent goes chime in is that there's been a moratorium for a number of years, and there is no system for doling out new state aid. But every biennium they consider it, and what they've been considering doing is basically they have a fund, $200 million, something like that, and they pay out what they currently have on the books out of that. And then as those get paid off, there's a little extra each year. And when it gets up to a certain point where they feel like they can start to fund new schools, they'll probably put it out as a competitive system. So the school with most need is going to most likely get the first funds that come up. Is that going to be in the next biennium? Is it going to be 2 years after that? I don't know. Dr. Onyx, do you know anymore?
No, I think every year it comes up, and it seemed like it's been more in the discussion of late. So I think there's a chance that we may see some of that coming back. I wouldn't count on it. I think that's school's goal to count on that. But on our part, we've done everything we can, making contacts with the state, keeping our paperwork up to date. Every 6 months, schools that are in the queue, as it were, and we were one of them, have to do an updated report on what it is we're thinking about doing or what stage we're in. So we've stayed current with that. Our next major update to the state on that will be in September 1st. So we're trying to keep ourselves in position. So when and if that does become a reality, certainly we'll be in a position to take advantage of that, to access that. But I think at this point it's it'd be wonderful if it happens. I would say that if we decide we got to wait till it happens, then we're going to be waiting for a while. That would be my guess, but I could be wrong about that. In case I am wrong, we're going to be very aggressive and active and stay current to make sure our application is considered when the time comes.
With this report, it will list just your 80 items.
Yes.
Can it also maybe incorporate all the Band-Aids that have been being put on over the last, 10 years?
We've got quite a list, Lynn.
Plus flooding, whatever, shutting down the school, teachers using screwdrivers to turn on the heaters, whatever, wearing hats. That'll be included in the report as well?
Yeah, we
for
have.
people to see?
Yep. Unit ventilator here, unit ventilator there, roof here, roof there.
What I've included in the report so far is, what I've collected for data. So it's sounding like there might be a lot more history than the one, the 6 months that I've been hanging around. And that might be helpful for me to get. But I can't get into the report until I know those things. Like I said, the ages of the roofs and things of that nature, I found out what's newer. So that way I'm not putting in money for replacing it, but I'm not necessarily spelling out all the work that already has been done, only what needs to be done.
I just want to clarify get for you clarification on one thing, which is what I think I heard, but I want to make sure I heard it right. If we build a new school, it will be inherently safer and structurally far more sound than renovating this building, whether we do it in 5 years or 1 year.
Yes.
Significantly. And then the second thing I heard you say is that the longer we wait, the greater the cost will be. That's guaranteed because inflation is starting to rise and we get some instability with steel and whatnot.
Yes.
Okay.